for another weekly episode of Nomberg Law Live. As we do each Tuesday, we try to bring interesting conversations with people in their areas of expertise. And my guest today is Michael Osacky with Baseball in the Attic. Good morning, Michael. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Happy to be here.
Well, I've been looking forward to this discussion for quite a while, and people, okay, hold on just a second. Okay, now we're good. I've been looking forward to our conversation for quite a while because people who know me know that I've jumped back into the sports card hobby about 2 years ago and have just fallen in love with it all over again. And I've tried to corral my enthusiasm so that I'm not just, oh, I got to have that. I want that. I want that. I'm trying to focus my collecting largely due to the fact that I only have X dollars to be able to spend on it each time. But guys, we brought Michael, who is a certified lead appraiser and deals with PSA, and we'll get into PSA in just a minute. Michael has spoken to, you name the magazine or the financial leaders about the hobby over the years, and I'll put a link to Michael's website in our show notes. But Michael, share just a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get started.
Well, I got started in 1997 when my grandfather got me a shoebox of old baseball cards for my birthday. And it got me on the hunt of not only trying to find more of them, but also understand the values. Why, if I have two of the same baseball cards, why is one worth $10 and one could be worth $1,000? And I started to understand it was about condition, the corners, the centering. Are there any print defects? Are there any gum stains on the back? And that was really interesting to me. And then I also realized that there was a gap in the marketplace for an appraiser like myself, whereas I could go to a card show and there might be 100 or 200 dealers buying and selling their cards or autographs, but there was no independent party that was actually doing the appraising. The dealers were kind of acting in a conflict of interest. They were buying, they were selling, they were appraising, and that didn't make sense to me. And so that was like the aha moment a couple of decades ago, and here I am today.
Well, it's when I stopped collecting is when I guess I just had a shift in life priorities. I always have loved the sport of baseball and all sports, but I stopped collecting in the early 90s. And I think that predated grading of cards. Everything was, as we know, is raw, ungraded. And you would look at it and you would say, oh, that looks mint or near mint, or that looks pretty good or fair or poor. And it was really very subjective. And you could go into your card shop, your local card store, and you could haggle a little bit, but then the card store owner would say, all right, here's my bottom line. Well, when did grading of cards, slabbing them, if you will, when did all that begin, and how did that change the hobby to where we've come full circle today?
Well, PSA started in 1991, so believe it or not, 30 years ago. But I would argue that it didn't become commonplace until the late 90s and early 2000s, and they played and still do play a very important role. Because kind of like you were alluding to, everybody thinks what they have is mint condition, a perfect 10, and that's almost never the case. The reason why you see, like on CNN or the Wall Street Journal or wherever, a PSA 10 sells for $1 million is because there might only be one of them in the entire world or two of them in the entire world. And most likely what you have is not one of them. I send a lot of cards and autographs to PSA every week because I am also an authorized submitter. And 99% of the people, before they even send me the cards, will tell me that their cards are mint condition. So I have to kind of, talk them off the ledge and help them understand why this 86 Fleer Michael Jordan is not a PSA 10, which a PSA 10 right now is, let's say, $575,000, but a PSA 8 is $15,000. And to the naked eye, a lot of people cannot tell the difference between an 8, 9, and a 10. So But PSA, is great. They bring buyers and sellers together. Everybody knows exactly what a PSA 5 is or what a PSA 8 is and what the current market value should be.
Well, you're right. It takes that sentimental approach out of your collectibles, and maybe it's that card was given to you as a gift, or it takes you back to a certain time, but you overlook the average collector. Oh, I think I've got a gem mint 10 card here, and in reality, there's some scrapes or the corner's a little loved, etc. But you're right. When I go to card shows, and I've gone to a couple of shows this year, and I still see the majority of the cards are raw, ungraded. Seeing more and more slabbed cards, graded cards, but there has been, I guess, I don't know if the word is explosion. During the pandemic, the hobby really has just taken off like gangbusters. Kind of address that just a little bit, and then I'm going to come back to my example of what I was talking about with card shows.
Yeah, so during the pandemic, in the past 12 months, the market has exploded higher, unlike anything we've ever seen before or the hobby has ever seen before. When the pandemic was first starting in early March of last year, I was in New York City, in Manhattan, for the entire week. And I remember vividly each day as I would go outside and walk around, I would be stopped at a stoplight waiting for it to turn green. People were on their phones, talking to their parents or coworkers. They were scared. They didn't know what was going on. Things were shutting down. I would jump in an Uber. I remember the woman next to me. She was the director of the Brooklyn Library, and her boss said everything must be shut down for the rest of the week starting tonight. And myself, I was wondering if I was going to be out of a job or, what the demand was going to be for my services. Now, fast forward 12 months, here we are today. I cannot think of a single business or industry that benefited more than our industry, the collecting. And there's several reasons for it. People could not go out and spend their money on restaurants or leisure activities, travel. They were spending money on baseball cards or sports memorabilia. They were going on to eBay. Then over the summer, you had stimulus checks from the government. And again, people were putting money into the hobby. Then you also had athletes and celebrities on Instagram and social media that were taking photos and sharing it with their friends. You had world record sales seemingly every single weekend. And these were $1 million sales. And that drew worldwide attention. And here we are today. PSA now has over 10 million cards in backlog, and the demand for the services has never been higher. Last month, PSA was acquired for $853 million. There is just such demand for the service, whether it's getting their cards graded, getting the autographs authenticated. And there is a real stickiness to that demand, meaning I think as we kind of come out of this pandemic and kind of restart, there still will be demand and stickiness and interest in the hobby long term. And I think that's exciting. But right now, I'm just staying super, super busy as PSA is. And it's really, really exciting.
I was going to say, I bet you're as busy right now or in the last several months as you may have been in the hobby in the last several years because of the I keep using the word explosion, but that's really to me the best way to describe how popular things have just become. When you have Giannis in the NBA, who's the two-time MVP, going on social media showing all of the purchases of his own card that he's been making, the Gary V's of the world, and all of the others who just have been promoting the hobby for so many months. You're right. I think all of these things have come together, but most notably, people aren't traveling. They aren't spending their money on the experiences like going to games, et cetera. They're spending it on the collectibles. But one of my fears, and I think you and I have kind of briefly talked about this in Clubhouse or been in some discussions, is whether the hobby is outpricing the everyman, or the new collector, or the child who wants to get involved. how do you approach that? And I know that's a huge thing to tackle, but let's say that you have a new child who's 9 years old and loves baseball and wants to collect some cards, and you don't have a local card shop. You go on eBay, for example, and you see packs of cards are just ridiculous in values, or not values, but costs. So what do you do? How do you make it available to the everyman?
This is a big problem. And when I think about the long-term growth and trajectory of the hobby, we must have that generation, young kids, interested to kind of see long-term growth. And you're right. I think it's ridiculous to see a box of cards unopened for 300 or 400 or 500 bucks. Mommy or daddy can't spend that type of money. And to be honest, that's a lot and that's ridiculous. And even a pack, 15, 20 bucks, whatever it is, that's way too much. And now you're also seeing vendors like for the baseball cards or basketball cards at Target or Walmart. They're being attacked. People are stealing some of their wares. I just got a note yesterday from a friend. They saw a vendor stocking the shelves at Walmart, and he was putting some aside secretly so he could buy them. But going back to your question, I think what needs to potentially happen then, because people are getting priced out of some of the stuff, is the father or mother maybe needs to show their kid or kids what they collected as a kid. So maybe something vintage that's very affordable. Maybe it's like a John Doe card or something from 1964 that maybe costs $2 or $3. Mm-hmm. And on the back, you'll see the biography and where his stats, and maybe the young kid or son, maybe the young son or daughter will become interested in something vintage because it's more affordable. Mm-hmm. Because the new stuff is just, it's too crazy. Yeah. And I also don't like it at all.
Well, that's, this will kind of show you my age a little bit, but my first set, and my favorite still today, is the 1975 Topps, the multicolored kind of, I don't know how you describe it, but it's just with all those colors were just so vivid. But I loved looking on the back, certain players. I think, if I remember correctly, they had little cartoons or little factoids about the player or somebody else in major leagues. But that was my first year. That was my first set. And that's kind of my sweet spot, if you will, in the hobby. So anytime I can find either the minis or the regular cards in good shape, I try to add to my collection.
Well, 1975 was a great year. It was George Brett's rookie, Robin Yount, Jim Rice. But because of the colors you described, it's very difficult to find high grades because the green or the yellow or whatever, or the purple will show white. And once it does that, it'll get assigned a lower grade.
No, you're so right. It's so many of those other years, like 71 with the black borders, show the same thing. But guys, I'm talking with Michael Osacky with Baseball in the Attic, and we're just talking about the hobby, all kind of good stuff. If you have questions or comments for Michael, just throw them in the comments section. Let's talk about local card shops, LCSs. And I live in Birmingham, Alabama, as you know. We have maybe 5 or 6 dedicated shops around our state. Sadly, we only have one in the metro area. Birmingham's the largest city in our population-wise in our state, but we only have one. And card shows every once in a while in the north part of our state. And I think that card shows are just the neatest thing for the hobby because it brings everybody together. You're able to actually see people in person, and you can hold the cards as opposed to just looking online on eBay or Instagram. But let's talk about card shops. In the 80s, when I was a kid, they were everywhere. But with, I guess, I don't know if it was the junk wax era or the whatever happened. I know you're a better historian than I, but they seem to have largely have gone away. But are they now making somewhat of a comeback?
The local card shows were extremely popular in the 1990s for many reasons. But then what happened was in 1995, eBay started. Mm-hmm. And not just eBay, but the entire internet was really blossoming. And so what you could do then, let's say you were collecting a 1975 Topps baseball card set, and you were missing 37 cards from that set. Well, up until eBay, you got to go to the local card show or card shop and find those 37 cards.
Mm-hmm.
But with eBay, you could wake up in the morning, you could not brush your teeth, be in your pajamas, and just type a couple things onto eBay, find those cards, they would be shipped, and in 5 days, you would get the cards back. So it really destroyed the business model of card shows. Now, here we are today where so the hobby is just exploding, as we just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a ton of vacant retail storefronts, as a lot of retailers, unfortunately, went out of business in the last 12 months. And landlords are trying to just get anybody in at a discounted rate. And so I do think you're going to start seeing some new local card shops pop up. And I think that's good. I think that the entrepreneurs who are trying to open up these new card shops skew a little bit younger. A lot of times the local card shops in your town that have been around for decades are not innovating. The owner has been there for 30, 35, maybe 40 years.
Yep.
And so it's important, as I was saying earlier, for new blood, new growth to kind of come in. And I think we're going to start seeing these new card shops pop up very soon.
They're not all going to be like the Goliath Burbank card shop, but they can at least serve their local communities. That's absolutely right. Michael, let's talk a little bit about insuring collection. I know that's one of your main. You're an appraiser, and you do such a great job around the country looking at just. I'm jealous that one aspect of your job is you get to see these really cool collectibles all the time. So I know, and I do want you to talk a little bit about why someone should insure their collection, just a little bit about how do you do that? And then secondly, share a couple of really cool items you might have seen along the way that you may have not have seen in other times.
Yeah, you're right. So I wake up every morning and I never know who's going to call me or who's going to email me. I don't even know what I'm going to see. I have appointments back to back every single day, but I don't know exactly what someone has. So it's always fun. And that's the best part of my job, is not only seeing the stuff, but also meeting the people, hearing their stories. Why do they still have something? Why was something never thrown away years ago by their mother or by their father? But usually people will call me in for a couple of different reasons. One, insurance purposes, especially now, everything kind of 5X or 10X in the past 12 months. People had a $100,000 collection. It's now worth $1 million. That's serious money. Mm-hmm. And they want to insure it properly. And their insurance company will have them call me, or sometimes people will actually find me on Google and they'll say, I need insurance appraisal. So I'll come in for that. The other reason why people enlist my services for an appraisal will be for estate planning. They have a bunch of kids or grandkids, and they want to know when they die that everything will be accounted for, and this is what the value was on this date. And then lastly, I do some donation appraisals, especially for high net worth individuals or athletes or celebrities who want to donate something for a tax write-off. They may have an item that's worth $150,000, but their net worth is 20 million. And so they would much rather donate it to the Baseball Hall of Fame. And they need someone with my credentials. I'm USPAP compliant, which is what the IRS looks for to deem an appraisal worthy or not, and to make sure that that $150,000 value that I place is correct. And so they'll call me in. So those really are the three reasons why people will call me in. Now, back to your question about some interesting things that I've seen over the years. One was Babe Ruth's last autograph that he signed on his deathbed in 1948. Wow. A gentleman and his son had it, and they wanted me to appraise it. And I said it's about $4,000 or $5,000. And they said, "Oh, that's it?" And I said, "Yeah." And they go, "But Michael, look on the bottom right-hand corner," which I did not see. And it was dated August 16th, 1948. And I literally jumped out of my chair because I knew that was the day that Babe Ruth died. He was in the hospital for a couple of months. He was sick with cancer. And I asked him, "How do you have this?" Or I said, prove to me that this is, his last ever autograph, because I'm kind of a healthy skeptic there. And he took out a bunch of papers and put them on the desk. And basically, on his wife's side of the family was a priest, and that was Babe Ruth's priest. And the documentation he was showing me was going back and forth many years from the priest to Babe and vice versa. Babe was sick in Florida, was looking forward to getting back to Manhattan, having dinner with the priest. And I think what happened was, after being in the hospital for a couple months, Babe Ruth knew that his time had come, and that was the day that he thought he was going to die. And so he called his priest in, and he dated it, August 16th, 1948. So that was a pretty special, incredible piece. That's a story and a memory I will never, ever forget. One other one is...
let me ask you real quick, does that then impact the ultimate value to that autograph as opposed to another Babe Ruth autograph that's on a baseball that doesn't have a date?
So he asked me, he goes, so is it still $4,000 or $5,000? I said, no. I said, this is a six-figure piece for sure, but it's so unique. It's hard to actually pinpoint an exact or even a range of what it would go for. But we know that there would be some diehard Yankee and Babe Ruth collectors who would fight people for this item. So that was kind of the answer I gave him when he said, what's the value? And it's, me being an appraiser, I always like to give people a value, whether it's an exact value or a range. But for this piece, and this guy and his son didn't want like a formal appraisal report. He was just kind of curious on the value, like a verbal. And so I said six figures, but he said it'll never be sold. It'll be passed down to the family. It's a family heirloom.
Could you imagine in today's auctions with the crazy prices that have been going on, what that could be a seven-figure cost or value?
Right. Exactly. Because when I saw him years ago, this is before everything, and I said six figures. So yeah, exactly.
Wow. So I interrupted you. You were going to tell us one more item.
Oh, sure. So during the course of a year, I do a lot of speaking engagements, although with COVID, I'm doing zero, but a couple, they were probably in their like maybe late 70s, early 80s. And they brought me so after my speaking engagement, they came up and talked to me, and they had a complete 1915 Cracker Jack baseball card collection, 176 cards. There's Christy Mathewson and Ty Cobb and Honus Wagner and all these great Hall of Famers. And I went through every card. It took some time, but I did. I went through every card. I love Cracker Jacks. I love the color. And over the years, I do see a lot of Cracker Jacks, which I love and I'm thankful for. But so after, I looked at it, I said, maybe, I said $75,000 or $80,000 for the complete set. But before I told them that, I said, just out of curiosity, I want you to tell me what you think this is worth. I never ask people that, because people always say, oh, it's worth $10 million. It's worth $100 million. It's worth $1 billion, some crazy high number. And so the couple said, we think it's worth, or we hope it's worth $2,000. And I said, no, not even close. And so the husband said, well, I guess maybe $500 is okay. And I said, well, no, you're completely off. And I told them what the value was. And the husband, he looks at me and he says, listen, you're a young punk. I don't need someone lying to me. We had a horrible week, and the last thing we need is someone to BS us about the value of our collection.
Oh, wow.
And so I said, sir, he said, yeah, it's like $80,000. You may need to get a police officer to escort you to your car because there's a lot of money on this table. And, I said with a straight face, no smile. And I think he looked at me like for maybe 5 seconds and started to understand I was serious.
Right.
Then he looked at his wife and they started to cry and they hugged each other. And that was a pretty special moment.
What year was that?
This must have been maybe 6 or 7 years ago.
And now what's the estimated value would you put on that?
That's got to be maybe $750,000.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Well, Michael, we've got just a couple more minutes, but I do have a few questions for you. We were talking off the air. Let's say I've got some autographs on recognized paper envelopes from the Hall of Fame, but I don't have provenance. I don't have COAs, certificates of authenticity. If I want to know the true values, whether I'm interested in just keeping them in my collection or one day I want to sell them, what's the best way to have those authenticated, to let the whole world know, not just me as the buyer, let the whole world know these are legit, these are authenticated? How do you do that?
You definitely need to have PSA authenticate the items, because once they put their stamp of approval on it, all the buyers know that, wow, this is legit, this is very credible, and we will pay top dollar for these items. Mm-hmm. The other thing that happens is when an item is encapsulated or by PSA is, especially with the cards, though, I guess with autographs too, but if they're encapsulated, it helps preserve them from the elements, whether it's dust or their grandchild putting their sticky fingers on it. So that's important. And me being the head appraiser for PSA, I also submit a lot of things to PSA for customers because they don't feel comfortable filling out the paperwork, or they're confused on declared value. So I'm always happy to help people if they have cards or autographs that they want PSA to take a look at.
So that really takes the subjectivity out of it and gives it some authority behind it because of PSA's recognition in the industry. Two last questions for you. If I want to get into the hobby, and I've been a sports fan my whole life, but I just don't know where to begin. It's kind of like drinking from a fire hose. When you jump in, it's just overwhelming. When I got back into the hobby after 20 years being off, I studied the hobby, believe it or not, for almost a year just to figure out what's going on. What do you suggest if a father and son want to get into the hobby for the first time? How do you do so without just being so completely overwhelmed with what you're looking at?
It's kind of like buying a stock. Buy what you know and buy what you like. So with the stock, it's like maybe you buy coffee every morning at Starbucks. Maybe you should be taking a look at that stock. With this hobby, maybe you're a big Chicago White Sox fan and you went to a lot of games when you were a kid and you saw Harold Baines and you just fell in love with Harold Baines. Well, that's a pretty affordable card and autograph to collect. And so maybe you start there and then share your memories of Harold Baines with your son or with your daughter. That's how I recommend, as opposed to just saying people on social media are buying John Morant. Let's do that. No, I'm also a big fan of not going where people are, meaning if the herd of sheep are all going for one player or one issue, look elsewhere. There's plenty of things in this marketplace, and not just players, but sports and items, right? There's cards, there's photos, there's jerseys, and the jerseys could be game worn or not game worn. There's footballs, there's advertising pieces, there's books. I mean, there's just so much stuff. But again, buy what you know and buy what you like. And it's even more important if it's nostalgic, meaning you have sentimental value attached to it.
And not to mention, not in the cards world, there's all these non-sports cards that have just taken off. When I say non-sports, non-traditional, not hockey, basketball, soccer, baseball, football, but wrestling, Formula One, Star Wars, Pokemon. It's incredible what's out there these days. I saw a Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield. I don't know if it's a photo or if it was actually a card that some manufacturer put out, but they were both, it was autographed and they were asking these astronomical, but somebody out there, it means something to them and they will pay for it.
Absolutely. People are looking to buy anything. There's so much demand. There's so many eyeballs. But this is a fun hobby. This is a fun industry. And you don't have to spend a lot of money to have fun.
Yeah. Or you could spend all the money in the world and still have fun or not. But last question for you. I did some stalking on your website. and I saw some awesome photos of you with Hall of Famers. Talk about meeting Walter Payton.
Walter Payton was the first professional athlete that I ever met in 1994. Yeah, I was such a little kid back then. But I do remember the conversation, and I do remember how he treated me. Um, he was just the nicest guy, happy, always smiling, telling jokes, um, and just loving life. And that's a memory that I'll never forget. Not only because he was my first athlete that I ever met, but just his positivity and always smiling. And he signed a couple footballs for me, which I'll never sell. Someone could offer me 100 grand, and I'm telling you, I will not sell those Walter Payton signed footballs.
Kind of like the Babe Ruth autograph story. That's what I love about this hobby, are the backstories. How did X collectible come into your collection? And those are the best stories. I have one quick anti Johnny Bench story, and this may not be a very popular one. Um, I'm from South Alabama originally, Dothan, near Tallahassee, Florida. So we had, proximity wise, we could drive to spring training games. I have two younger brothers, and we loaded up in our van every spring, and we would go down for games. And we were in between a doubleheader. The Big Red Machine had already played. The starters had already played their part of the first game. We were in between games, and we were standing on the field that separated the game field from some of the practice fields. Great spot to get autographs. I'm probably 10, 11 years old, maybe, and my brothers are younger. And we've got paper and balls, just getting autographs. Morgan, Rose, and Bench are all walking together, and we're just begging for autographs like the other kids were near us. Rose comes over, no problem. Signs, how you doing, kid? All that good stuff. Morgan, same thing. I had seen Johnny Bench sign autographs. Now, growing up, I still am a big Thurman Munson fan, but I didn't let that. I wasn't wearing Yankee things because my dad said you can't wear any other teams if you're going to go to see the Reds. You can't wear Phillies. Anyway, Bench is signing, and he gets to right where we are, and he just walks away, and we're just like, come on, man, you're right here. He didn't look at us, didn't say a word. I don't know if he's having a bad day, but this was the great thing. Joe Morgan turns around as they're walking away, just goes like this. Like, I can't explain it. It is what it is. Anyway, I've never collected Johnny Bench cards. I love Pete Rose and Joe Morgan cards as a result. But everybody has those awesome stories. So thank you for spending some time with us, Michael, today.
Thank you. It was fun, and thank you for sharing that Johnny Bench story.
Yeah, I'm sure he's a lovely man, but just that moment, he was done signing and just didn't have the time. But anyway, guys, I've had an awesome conversation. I could talk to Michael forever, but he's got places to be, and we all have things to do today. Michael Osacky with Baseball in the Attic, and I put his website in our comments. And if you guys are on Clubhouse, Michael's always in our rooms, just giving so much value, so much great content to the hobby. And I really appreciate your time today, Michael. Thank you.
You're very welcome. We'll see you soon.
I hope so. And guys, this is the end of another episode of Nomberg Law Live every Tuesday. Interesting conversations with people in their areas of expertise. And Michael certainly fit that bill. Hope you guys have a safe rest of your week. See you next Tuesday.